I've always been a curious soul. From tinkering with gadgets to diving into the depths of the internet, there was always something new and exciting to discover. My name is Alex, a 21-year-old college student, majoring in computer science. My life was pretty ordinary. Classes, friends, late-night gaming sessions, and the usual YouTube binges. That's where it all began, on an otherwise mundane Tuesday night. I stumbled upon a YouTube video discussing internet security. It was the comments that caught my eye. One in particular mentioning the dark web, the unseen part of the internet, it read. I had heard about it, of course, but never really paid much attention. It was like a forbidden fruit, lurking in the shadows of cyberspace. My curiosity was piqued. I thought, how bad could it really be? Naive, I know. I decided to take the plunge. I knew the basics. Use a VPN, don't click on suspicious links, and most importantly, use the Tor browser. I downloaded Tor, feeling a mix of excitement and a tinge of fear. Little did I know, this was the beginning of a journey that would shake the very foundation of my reality. As the browser launched, I remember thinking about the stories I'd heard. It's a hub for illegal activities, they said. You'll find things you wish you hadn't, warned others. But there I was, driven by an innocent curiosity, about to delve into the abyss of the internet. The first few clicks were uneventful. It was mostly forums and pages that looked like they hadn't been updated since the early 2000s. But then, I found it. A directory. It was like a gateway to a world I never knew existed. Each link was a portal to something more bizarre and unsettling than the last. I realized then that this was no ordinary browsing session. I was witnessing the dark underbelly of the internet, a place where the rules of the surface web didn't apply, a place where anonymity was both a shield and a weapon. As I clicked through the sites, a sense of unease began to settle in. I kept telling myself it was just curiosity, that I wasn't really doing anything wrong. But deep down, I knew I was treading on dangerous ground. The innocence of my exploration was fading fast, replaced by a realization that some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. That night, I shut down my laptop and tried to sleep. But the images and the possibilities of what lay in the dark web haunted me. I was at the brink of a world far removed from my comfortable, mundane life. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. As days slipped into nights, my initial curiosity morphed into a haunting obsession. The dark web wasn't just a part of the internet. It was a different reality, a place where humanity's darkest desires were not just visible, but celebrated. I, Alex, was drowning in a sea of shock and moral dilemma, yet I couldn't stop myself from diving deeper. I remember the night I stumbled upon a site that chilled me to the bone. It was an auction, but not for antiques or collectibles. Human lives were being traded like commodities. Faces, stripped of dignity and hope, stared back at me from the screen. The brutality of it was overwhelming. But what shook me more was the normalcy with which the bids were placed, as if they were buying furniture rather than human souls. Then came the black market for body parts, a grotesque catalog of human anatomy, priced and displayed with disturbing precision. I felt nauseous, the images burning into my mind. I told myself I was just a spectator, not a participant, but the thin line between curiosity and complicity was blurring. The worst was yet to come. A link led me to a site that seemed straight out of a horror movie. Live experiments on people, broadcast for an audience with a twisted taste for the macabre. The screams, the pleas, the cold clinical commentary of the tormentor. It was all too real, too visceral. I watched frozen in horror as a person's dignity and life were stripped away for entertainment. Sleep eluded me for days. My mind was a whirlpool of horror and shock. I questioned everything: the internet, humanity, myself. How could such evil exist? And worse, how could I? From the safety of my room, watch it unfold. That's when I realized the dark web was more than just a hidden layer of the internet. It was a mirror, reflecting the most depraved parts of human nature, and I had gazed into it long enough to feel its darkness seep into my own soul. I wanted to stop, to forget everything I had seen, but a morbid fascination kept pulling me back. Each click, each new discovery, was a step further away from the innocent curiosity that had led me here. I was losing myself in the unseen depths of the dark web, unaware that the real nightmare was just beginning. The descent into the dark web's rabbit hole was like a slow-burn horror film, where each scene was more terrifying than the last. I had witnessed the unimaginable, the kind of stuff nightmares are made of, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the night when the dark web reached out of the screen and into my life. It started with a flicker on my laptop screen. A brief moment of disconnection, a glitch in the matrix, I thought. But when the screen stabilized, my heart froze. There, amidst the sea of disturbing images and text, was something far more chilling. My own personal information. My name, address, even my social security number flashed on the screen for a fleeting second before disappearing. Panic surged through me. This couldn't be real, could it? But deep down, I knew the truth. I had been exposed. My anonymity, my shield in this dark world was shattered. The taste of fear is peculiar. It's sharp, metallic, a flavor that overwhelms all senses. That night, I tasted true fear. My phone vibrated with an unknown number, I answered, and an unnerving, distorted voice whispered threats. Each word was a dagger, and with each threat, I felt my sense of security slipping away. The following days were a blur of paranoia and dread. I kept looking over my shoulder, jumping at shadows. The internet, once a sanctuary, became a battlefield. I was no longer a spectator. I was the target. Sleep was elusive, a luxury I couldn't afford. My mind replayed the threats, the exposure of my information, over and over. I tried to rationalize it, to convince myself it was just a scare tactic. But the fear had a grip on me, squeezing tighter with each passing hour. I tried to cover my tracks, to erase my digital footprint. But the dark web is a labyrinth with no clear exit. The more I tried to escape, the deeper I seemed to sink into its depths. The flavor of fear became my constant companion, a reminder of the invisible eyes watching, waiting. I was trapped in a game of cat and mouse, and I was the mouse, scurrying for safety in a world where safety was just an illusion. This was no longer about curiosity or thrill-seeking. It was about survival. And as I sat there, staring at the screen that had become my enemy, I realized the dark web was not just a place. It was a living, breathing entity, feeding on fear and despair. And I had become its latest prey. The line between the virtual and the real had blurred. And I, Alex, found myself trapped in a nightmare that was all too tangible. The dark web, once a distant, shadowy realm, had breached into my everyday life, bringing with it a terror that was insidious and relentless. The threats escalated quickly. It started with cryptic emails filled with details about my daily routines, places I frequented, people I knew. Someone was watching me, tracking my every move. The knowledge that I was being hunted was paralyzing. Trust became a luxury I could no longer afford. Friends, acquaintances, even strangers on the street. Anyone could be the predator lurking in the shadows. I attempted to sever my ties with the dark web, desperately trying to erase my digital footprint. But it was like trying to untangle a web woven with steel threads. Each attempt to protect myself seemed only to draw more attention, more threats. My computer, my phone, every connected device became an enemy, a portal for those hunting me to peer through. Sleep became a distant memory. I jumped at every sound, saw shadows in every corner. The safety of my own home now felt like a prison. The paranoia was suffocating, a constant reminder of the unseen danger that stalked me. One evening, the nightmare manifested physically. I returned home to find my apartment ransacked, personal items strewn across the floor. It was a message, loud and clear. I was vulnerable, and nowhere was safe. The invasion of my private space was a psychological blow that shattered any remaining illusion of security. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. The danger wasn't just online. It had crossed over into the real world. My involvement with the dark web had opened a door that couldn't be closed, inviting a darkness that was now part of my reality. I knew then that I had to fight back, to reclaim my life from the clutches of this unseen enemy. But how do you fight something you can't see? An adversary that hides behind the veil of the internet. I was out of my depth, a pawn in a game where the rules were written by those who thrived in the shadows. As I sat amidst the chaos of my violated home, the taste of fear lingered in my mouth. It was a bitter reminder of my vulnerability, of the price of curiosity. The hunt had begun, and I was the prey, scrambling for survival in a world where the lines between the virtual and the real had become dangerously blurred. The final confrontation was nothing like I had imagined. There was no dramatic showdown, no face-to-face with a masked villain. It was a silent battle, fought in the shadows of the internet and the corners of my own mind. I realized the only way to escape the dark web's grasp was to become smarter, more cautious. I delved into cybersecurity, learning how to mask my digital presence, how to shield my life from prying eyes. It was a race against time and against an enemy that thrived in the world of ones and zeros. Then came the night that changed everything. A knock on my door jolted me awake. Peering through the peephole, I saw a figure cloaked in darkness. My heart pounded as I remembered the threats, the violation of my privacy. But this time, I was ready. I had set up cameras, traps of my own. I called the police, whispering my situation through trembling lips. The figure vanished before the police arrived, but it was a turning point for me. No longer would I cower in fear. I had taken steps to protect myself, to fight back against the shadows. The encounter was a catalyst, igniting a determination within me to reclaim my life. In the following weeks, I became a ghost in the digital world. I learned the art of anonymity, the power of being unseen. My encounters with the dark web had taught me the hard way, but I emerged wiser, more resilient. The final chapter of my dark web saga was not an epic escape or a victorious battle. It was a quiet exit, a strategic retreat from a world that had brought me to the brink of destruction. I left no trace, no sign of my journey into the abyss. But the scars remained, the nights of terror, the sense of being hunted, the paranoia. They left a lasting impact on my psyche. I was safe, but the sense of security was forever altered. The dark web had shown me the depths of human depravity, and that knowledge could not be unseen. As I closed the chapter on this harrowing experience, I realized I had emerged not just a survivor, but a changed person. I had tasted the darkest flavor of fear and come out alive. But the experience had reshaped me, carved a deep understanding of the digital shadows that lurk behind the screens. I was no longer the naive college student who had ventured into the dark web out of curiosity. I was a survivor, hardened by the fires of a hidden war, forever vigilant in a world where the line between the virtual and the real is perilously thin. I've always found comfort in the predictable logic of code, the black and white world of zeros and ones. It's a stark contrast to the gray areas of human morality I've encountered in my career. My name is Chris, and I'm a white hat hacker. You might have heard stories about hackers being the bad guys, but I'm one of the good ones, a digital warrior fighting unseen battles in the shadows of the internet. My journey into the dark underbelly of the web started out of curiosity. It quickly turned into a mission, Sites like Black Source and Grand Mafia weren't just rumors. They were real, thriving hubs of illegal activities hidden in the darkest corners of the dark web. I remember the first time I infiltrated Black Source. It was like stepping into a digital Hades where every click could lead to something sinister. Black Source offered a terrifying array of services, from trafficking illicit substances to selling stolen data. But the most chilling were the live feeds, where anonymous users bid vast sums of money for real-time, cruel spectacles. It was a marketplace of human depravity, an abyss where morality was lost. Grand Mafia, on the other hand, was a network of hired mercenaries and assassins. It was a sinister place where lives were traded like commodities. The anonymity of the dark web provided a shield for these transactions, making it a haven for those seeking to commission the unthinkable. Infiltrating their network was like navigating a minefield. Every step had to be calculated. Every move had to be precise. The day I exposed them felt like a personal triumph, but it came with a price. I had made enemies, powerful ones, lurking in the shadows, waiting for their chance to strike back. I managed to debunk several of their operations, exposing them to the eyes of the law. It felt like a victory, but in this world, every victory is short-lived. As I took down one site, two more would spring up in its place, like a never-ending game of whack. Mole. The brutality wasn't just in the content of these sites. It was in their relentless nature, their constant evolution to evade justice. I never imagined that my digital battles would have real-world consequences. I was about to learn that the hard way. The day I was arrested was like any other, until it wasn't. I was at my desk, immersed in lines of code, when the sharp knock came. It was forceful, urgent. My heart skipped a beat as I opened the door to find police officers, their faces stern and unyielding. "You're under arrest," one of them said, his voice devoid of emotion. Confusion clouded my mind as handcuffs clicked around my wrists. The charges were absurd, incomprehensible. Hacking, the theft, even conspiracy to commit crimes I'd spent my life fighting against. It felt like a nightmare, one I couldn't wake up from. As I sat in the cold, sterile interrogation room, the reality of my situation began to sink in. The evidence was stacked against me, fabricated digital trails leading back to my doorstep. I realized then, with a chilling clarity, that this was Arat's work, the dark web administrator I'd crossed paths with in my crusade against Grand Mafia. He had framed me, meticulously weaving a web of digital lies to ensnare me. The brutality of the online world had spilled into my reality, shattering the barrier between my virtual battles and my physical existence. I was no longer just a white-hat hacker fighting against faceless criminals in cyberspace. I was a pawn in a much larger, more sinister game. The days blurred into each other as I awaited trial. Each moment was a torment, a mixture of fear, anger, and a relentless drive to prove my innocence. But the more I struggled, the tighter the web seemed to wrap around me. It was a brutal realization, understanding the extent of Arat's reach and cunning. In the midst of despair, I clung to one thing. I had to survive this. I had to clear my name and expose the true criminal behind this twisted plot. It was a battle unlike any I had faced before, one that I had to win, not just for myself, but for all those who had fallen victim to the merciless world of the dark web. The day I was released felt less like freedom and more like the beginning of a new imprisonment. The charges against me had been dropped due to lack of evidence, but the shadow of suspicion still hung heavily over me. The world outside felt different now, more hostile, more dangerous. I was a free man, yet I felt more trapped than ever. Paranoia became my constant companion. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, followed. My usual haunts on the internet, once a sanctuary, were now off limits. Arat's reach seemed to extend everywhere, and I couldn't risk leading him back to me. I was cut off from the one thing that gave me power, my connection to the digital world. Every unfamiliar face on the street seemed like a potential threat. I found myself diving into alleys, taking convoluted routes to shake off imaginary tales. My life had become a twisted game of cat and mouse, and I was always the mouse, scurrying for cover, for survival. Sleep was fitful and filled with nightmares. I dreamt of dark web assassins, of Arat's sneering face, of being trapped in an endless maze of digital deceit. The line between reality and paranoia blurred, each feeding into the other in a vicious cycle. Despite the overwhelming fear and isolation, a fiery determination simmered within me. I couldn't let Arat win. I couldn't let Arat win. I had to clear my name, not just for my sake, but for all those who suffered because of people like him. I started gathering evidence, working in the shadows, using every trick I knew to stay under the radar. It was a slow, painstaking process, but it was all I had. As I delved deeper into this world of shadows, I stumbled upon a cryptic message. A single word stood out, resonating with an eerie significance. Bishop. It was a clue, a lead that I couldn't ignore. It promised a path to the truth, to my redemption. Little did I know, it would lead me to a confrontation more brutal and terrifying than anything I had ever faced. The word bishop haunted me. It was a cryptic clue that gnawed at my mind, a puzzle piece in a game of high stakes. I dove back into the digital world, my fear now overshadowed by an obsessive need for answers. The deeper I delved, the clearer it became. Bishop was not just a word. It was a code name, a key to unraveling Arat's schemes. I traced the digital breadcrumbs, each step bringing me closer to Arat. It was a perilous journey, a dance on the edge of a knife. My every move had to be calculated, each line of code crafted to avoid detection. The tension was palpable, a constant weight on my shoulders, as if I was walking through a minefield. Then it happened. A breakthrough. Hidden in the encrypted depths of the dark web, I found it irrefutable evidence of Arat's crimes. A digital trail leading straight to him. It was my moment of triumph, but it was short-lived. Arat was not one to be outsmarted easily. He knew I was onto him, and he struck back with a brutality I had never seen. It was a battle of wits and wills, our confrontation unfolding in the shadowy realms of cyberspace. We were two hackers locked in a deadly game, each move more dangerous than the last. But I had something Arat didn't, the truth on my side. And in this game, the truth was the deadliest weapon. The final confrontation was intense, a flurry of code and countermeasures. It was in this digital chaos that I finally cornered Arat, trapping him with his own web of lies. The moment I exposed him, it felt like a weight lifted off my shoulders. The game was over. I had won. But victory was bittersweet. As I sat there, surrounded by the remnants of our digital war, I reflected on the journey. The dark web was a world where brutality knew no bounds, where the unseen battles were the most dangerous. I had survived, but I knew the fight was far from over. There would always be others like Arat, lurking in the shadows, waiting to spread their web of darkness. I had emerged victorious, but the battle against the dark web's criminal elements was an ongoing war. A war I was determined to keep fighting. In the dim light of dusk, Agent Lara Croft pulled up outside the isolated barracks at Fort Bragg. She got out of her plane car and looked with determined eyes across the empty parking lot. It had been more than a year since Private Jacob Sparrow's body was found in the woods near the barracks. There were no signs of foul play in the death. The military cops never found out what happened with the case, and it has been cold for a long time. But something about it had always bothered Croft, who was an experienced Army SID agent with a strange knack for finding secrets no one else has found. As she walked into the barracks, She showed her ID to the young private, who was working as a guard. She told him straight out, "I need to get into Sparrow's old room." It was clear that Croft's strict attitude made the private nod uncomfortably, and he led her down the lonely hallway. She went into the small rooms that hadn't been used since Sparrow died. Croft started carefully going through his things that he had left behind, looking at every paper document and electronic device for hints. She carefully searched the room for 2 hours with only her flashlight to light her way. Most of what she found was boring, like textbooks, uniform accessories, and personal pictures. But then she saw a flash of light stuck behind the worn cushion. Croft took out an unlabeled flash drive and curiously plugged it into her laptop. She was met with a digital treasure chest that made her gasp for air after getting past the security. The drive had records of Sparrow's secret online actions that she had never thought about. She used forums on the dark web to look at all kinds of illegal and disturbing topics. He was a regular poster on a number of sites run by an unknown person who went by the name Manga. From what Croft learned, it seemed like Sparrow may have found something much scarier than she had thought while searching the web late at night in secret. As she hacked into his CC at the barracks, her heart beat faster. Sparrow had found proof that Manga's sites were being used for illegal activities like selling guns, laundering money, and more. It looked like he was actively looking into the crime and gathering evidence to give to the police. But someone must have heard about his plans and shut him up before he could blow the lid off of their whole operation. At that moment, Croft's phone buzzed in a scary way. When she opened the text message, there was a blurry picture of Sparrow's Kia dog tags and a scary message that said, "Leave it alone if you want to live." He was brave enough to cross Manga, and it cost him a lot. Do not go through the same mistake. Croft's jaw was set in determination as she removed the threat when no one replied. Whoever this Manga was, he had no idea what kind of person she was. If he tried to scare her into not telling the truth, it was just the start of her research. Agent Croft knew she had to move quickly before someone could find her. She spent the night carefully making a digital identity to get into Manga's secret sites in her dimly lit safe house flat. By dawn, she had made up Liam Brooks's full online history and digital record. Brooks was a disillusioned ex-serviceman who wanted to make money any way he could. Croft, pretending to be Brooks, nervously input the scary URL into her Tor browser after taking Sparrow's login information from his computer. The dark spot had a scary red glow to it. As she looked through the forums, she was shocked by the shady business that was going on in the background of the internet. Guns, drugs, and even people were being sold for the greatest dark wealth. Croft gathered her courage and started talking, slipping in hints about her plans to commit a crime. Within hours, unknown people started calling Brooks with rich offers that were too good to pass up. They planned to meet at an empty building to drop off weapons, but they walked right into Croft's trap. She secretly recorded proof that was very bad for them on her devices as witnesses to their crimes. Even though taking out that first cell led to useful information, Croft knew it was just the beginning of Manga's huge business. She carefully mapped the group's digital footprint coming from their secret spots for days. It became clear that all roads went back to a remote compound deep in North Carolina's Nantahala National Forest as they looked over financial records and shipping manifests. At night, Croft put together a kit of supplies and packed her SUV. For a reconnaissance trip, she would be going on by herself. She was on quiet mode as she drove through the narrow back roads. The thought of what she might find made her adrenaline rise. Using GPS, she found a chain-link fence around a large lodge that was set back from an old logging road. Croft saw armed guards walking around the edge, while infrared and scout cameras looked around in the dark. She hid in thick brush for a long time and watched everything that happened while writing down every detail. The days turned into weeks as they watched the bad things going on inside those walls. Croft saw piles of illegal drugs, guns, and even cages full of people waiting for unknown outcomes. People in the ranks only knew their mysterious boss, Manga, as the person in charge of everything. As her investigation got closer to revealing his whole bad business, she gathered a huge amount of information. She had been there, but no one had totally missed her. One night, as Croft was packing up her hideout before it got dark, she noticed movement in the distance. Before she could do anything, armed people came out of the dark. As she ran for cover in the thick bush, gunfire broke out as her pursuers closed in. The chase was on. As Agent Croft shook her way through the tall trees, adrenaline rushed through her. Her hot breath came out in short, rough bursts. Gunshots could be heard in the darkness behind her, and some of them were too close to be safe. From her work as a surveillance officer, she knew these woods like the back of her hand. Her skills at following animals in the wild were the only thing that kept her one step ahead of the armed men. Croft came up with a plan to turn the chase around as it went on. It was on purpose that she left her winding path and went straight ahead to a small opening. When the shooters broke through, thinking it would be easy to kill her, she set her trap. Croft fired accurate shots at them from where she was hidden, killing 2 attackers before they could respond. She took the gun away from the last scared man and held him at gunpoint until she got an answer. She put her hands behind his back and said, "Take me to your boss." He didn't want to lead the way through the trees to the faraway lights, but he had to. Croft quietly watched from afar as the property came into view through the trees. She moved in the middle of the night with her prisoner when she saw an open hatch to the basement level. As she walked through the dim hallways, a noise drew her to an open study. Croft looked inside and saw a person hunched over a fire that was full of papers. With her gun trained on the man who stood still, she asked, "Manga, I presume." He turned around and smiled at her in a scary way. "Agent, you've given me a lot of trouble. But tonight is the last day." Croft's hostage ripped out of his handcuffs and into the fight before he could reach for the gun on the mantel. During the fight that followed, a shot was fired. The prisoner was dead when the smoke cleared. He had been hit in the chest by a single bullet. Manga stood on top of him, his fingers still on the trigger and his eyes filled with anger. "You will pay for this interference." Croft got into a brutal fight with him and used all of his skill and strength to beat the bigger thief. Once she had the upper hand, she pushed him against the stove and grabbed the burned pieces inside. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." The dog tags of Sparrow, which were the last piece of the puzzle, were clenched in her hand. Manga's empire was based on the last war, making plan that Sparrow had found and threatened to reveal, which ultimately cost him his life. As backup arrived, sirens sounded through the night. Manga was caught and his whole system was taken apart, so justice was finally done. As the police put up a fence around the property, Agent Croft let out a sigh of relief. When the truth came out, she made it clear that she would go after anyone who did wrong, no matter where they were hiding, even in the darkest parts of the internet.